Buddy, this is part two of the Raymond Barton project. Here we're going to tell more stories or hear more stories from Ray and might ask him a few questions. I want to rewind a little bit. Ray, when did your family first move into the States?
Okay, well, I was born in 48. We went back and forth a couple times. So I'm thinking it probably was the middle 50s.
Middle 50s?
Because I had already started possibly some kind of a pre-nursery school or whatever in Ipswich, England. So I'm thinking middle 50s.
What brought your family over? What was the deciding factor?
Dad, of course. Dad was born in the United States. Dad met Mom during the war in England. Mm-hmm. Dad had worked.
The Second World War?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
No, the big one, the WW1. And Dad had worked in England for my grandfather, running a greyhound racing track and an outdoor roller skating rink, and just decided that he felt there'd be more opportunities to come to the United States, which it had worked out very well for him.
Did you already have family where you're moving?
Oh yeah, we have family in Hammond, Indiana.
Okay.
And we first moved to Hammond, and then we moved to Munster, Indiana, where I ended up graduating in 1967 from Munster High School. And then the rest, goes on from there.
So, how were you in high school? Did you win any superlatives? What kind of kid were you?
I was lucky I was able to get through high school. I'm probably the only person that received a diploma in 1967 with the first graduating class, with everybody standing up and yelling and screaming, possibly more in disbelief than anything.
So, let me ask you, Ray. Who was your first big band or singer that you got into, like, as a kid? What first got you?
Well, let me think. Well, I think all of us back then, I mean, obviously, the Beatles.
Well, of course.
Were hitting the scene. And I just finished reading a book about the Beatles, and it reflects and talks about every song that they had done in order.
Oh wow!
That's the song. The book is called "It's Been a Hard Day's Right."
Oh,
and
that's very clever.
Yeah, it is, and it's quite interesting because the Beatles were so influenced by the groups of the 50s. Jerry Lee Lewis. B.B. King, a lot of the blues stars and everything. It's just amazing when you read this book. There's one song that the Beatles wrote, which is called Taxman, mm-hmm. and in the middle of it, they yell out Taxman, and they actually got that from watching Batman.
Oh yeah, the old Batman show, yeah.
The Batman, and then at the beginning of the song, it shows, Batman, and that's what Taxman came from. So many of their songs were influenced by American artists, and as they evolved through the progression of what they did, and how each one of them spun off into their own little thing in the end, it was just quite interesting. But the influence was really uncanny. For instance, just the end of this month, Mary and I, Andrew and Sarah, we're going to go see Bob Dylan.
Oh, that's awesome.
And Andrew says, well, he doesn't have much of a voice. I said, well, he never ever had much of a voice.
It's just about the storytelling with him.
It was what he wrote, and the stories that he wrote, and these iconic melodies that he wrote, and then his influence on everybody.
That's social and political culture.
So when you're looking at the Rolling Stones and you're looking at the Beatles, and later on you're looking at the Doobie Brothers, the Beach Boys. The Beatles were very influenced by the Beach Boys. The Beach Boys' harmonies and their sounds. So the evolution not only was for the Beatles of the music scene, but the evolution was for everybody. I mean, I was very, very lucky because when I first started booking bands back in the early 70s, groups that used to play proms for me were, Shaka Khan and Rufus.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Which started off as a band called the American Breed. Chicago obviously started off in Chicago. REO Speedwagon.
Yeah.
Styx used to work for me and did proms for me. They used to be called TW4.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, if you go online and look at Styx and how they started off, the Styx worked for me. And I work with another agent out of Champaign, Illinois, called Doug Bauer. And Doug Bauer, along with a gentleman called Irv Azoff, produced many of these bands. I can remember sitting in a bar in Champaign, Illinois, sitting there with Doug, Irv Azoff, and sitting around with a lot of really famous musicians. Two of those musicians ended up writing the song "Hotel California."
Oh, that's amazing.
So it is really amazing.
What's the first instrument that you started to play?
I played the drums.
The drums?
Drums, yes, and I did not play it that well. I played the drums, and then of course with my brother David, we sang in folk groups.
Oh, that's cool.
Had a group called the Village Singers, and that particular group we had in the middle 60s, and we did a lot of shows, and back then they were called hootenannies. I don't know.
Did you do cover songs, or did you do original songs?
We did mostly cover songs. They would be Pete Seeger songs, Peter, Paul, and Mary,
Nice.
Joan Baez. And so many of those songs, going back to what was going on with the Vietnam War and everything. I mean, it was such a turbulent time, but it was such a growing time.
Yeah.
For so many people. I mean,
the country really changed over that time period,
when you look at events like Woodstock, and some of these very large gatherings, you see them today, but they never really had the impact or probably the quality of talent that we had.
Were you ever at any protests during the 60s or 70s?
I did. I did a couple. I didn't tell my dad about them, but in 1968, I came back. I was in college in Pontiac, Illinois, and I did go to Grant Park and was there for a while.
Oh, cool.
When everything erupted there during the I think it was the Democratic Convention.
Yeah.
So it's just, we all evolved. But, I look at the music today, and I just really don't know if it just is of the same, what do I want to say, probably quality
okay,
or the way that the music is written today versus the music that was.
Do you feel it's less from the heart now, that people are just trying to find songs to make money? Or
I get a little confused on hip hop and rap, but that may just be me. Other people may like it, but it's kind of funny how we always seem to be going back to the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. You look at artists like Carole King. Some of the songs she wrote, for the Shirelles, groups of the 50s and 60s, and they're still classics today.
Well, yeah, they hold up very well over time. Yeah.
You go to a Beach Boy concert today, and it's very, very possible that you will see a grandmother with the daughter, with the great grandma. It's possible.
Oh yeah, it's a multi-generational thing.
It's possible to see 4 generations
all relating the same music,
relating to those groups from the 60s and 70s. So what was it back then? What was so great about what they did back then that has such a different relationship with the way music is now?
I know that's a good question.
I mean, you look at Memphis where we live now, and even if you don't like Elvis Presley, just to go to Graceland, just to see all the gold records up on the wall.
Yeah, he's been dead for a long time, and people still go there every single day.
People still go there, and I'll talk to people, and they'll say, "I'm coming to Memphis," and I say, "Well, you need to go to Beale Street," and I said, "And even if you don't like Elvis, you need to go to Graceland just for the sake of going there."
It's a national monument, basically.
It's like a whole nother world. It truly is.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it'd be cool to see that with other artists. If they had similar things, I wish you could go to for great artists, like Graceland type of thing. I mean, but it seems like the only real experience like that.
Yeah, and I think it's the evolution. I mean, when you look at we saw Paul McCartney last year. I mean, the show was breathtaking. We saw the Eagles last year. We saw Elton John. And not only do I look at the artists, but I look at the people around me, and I see the delight on their faces, and then I see the fact that they're. I made a comment once on Facebook. We were going to see James Taylor at Mud Island in Memphis, and I looked all around, and I felt so old because majority of the people in the audience all had gray hair. Then I realized, but there are also young kids there. So to be able to span 30, 40 years is just quite an accomplishment. I wonder if artists today...
People will still be listening to it further down the road. Yeah.
20 or 30 years from now,
I don't think a lot of it will hold up. I mean...
we're looking at an artist like Will.i.am and say, oh yeah, I remember his song 20
Oh yeah, it really touched me deeply, right?
I don't think it's going to happen.
No, probably not. I don't think there's the same depth and art in those kind of songs.
Right.
So I want to ask you, what were you doing in the 80s? I haven't heard too much about any early 80s stories. What do you have going on then?
The 80s, I did a lot of work. I worked for my dad and my Uncle Ray at the Stardust bowling alleys in Hammond, Indiana, Maryville, Indiana. Then I went into the hotel business for quite a few years.
What do you think about the music during the 80s? Were you into it? Or?
Oh, yeah. I was into it, but I must confess we would always go back to
the 50s and 60s hits?
Yeah, to the older groups. And, as acid rock came in and as funk came in, I mean, there are still artists today. There's a one group called George Clinton and Parliament.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I mean,
George Clinton's
had them at Carowinds in the 80s, and the same production and show that they did then is just as great then as it is now. But then you look at a new artist like Bruno Mars. I mean, Bruno Mars is sensational.
Yeah, he's a good artist.
And for me, it's the old, almost Vegas style show.
Yeah.
The flashy outfits, the harmonies, the choreography, and everything.
He's almost like the new Prince, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And
maybe not as good, obviously, but
and I believe that people still want to hear the music.
Yeah.
But I really believe people want to see it. They want
the show too.
They want the show too.
And good music, yeah.
Yeah. For instance, we went to see Eric Clapton 2 years ago in Memphis, and Andrew went with us, our youngest son, who's 21, and I said, "This is a legend, Eric Clapton," and he was really, really good, but it wasn't really a real show. As a matter of fact, it was kind of a little bit disappointing. So I guess some artists just get to a point where
they're just kind of mellowing it in.
They're mellow, and this is what I do. I mean, he was still very good, but you go to see James Taylor, and it's a show every time you see it. It's a well-structured, put-together show. The sound is always good. He changes his sets every time he goes out on tour. It's a whole new production.
Well, that's great. Well, this concludes part 2, and we'll get back to you on part 3. Thanks so much, Ray.
Stay tuned for 3.